Welcome to Michigan Makes on the 6% Recycled channel. I'm with Dave
DeHem.
He is the president of the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame. We're going to do an interview and find some background about the system, what they do, where they do it, and history of Michigan motorsports. So thank you all for watching, and we'll get into it. So Dave, what is your title and what do you do for the Hall?
I'm the president of the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame. Been president since 2015. Been on their board of directors since 2008. Basically what I do is try to steer the hall in the right direction and make sure that the meetings are held. We hold 5 meetings a year, and I run the meetings, set up the agendas. The secretary does the minutes. Of course, I review them before I send them out. But basically I'm the spokesperson or the executive person in charge of the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame. Yeah. So the old saying, the buck stops here, well, guess what? The buck stops here. First meeting was in the spring of 1980. Okay. A gentleman by the name of Dick Lee, who we just lost earlier this year. He was a West Michigan guy. Always had been a race fan, owned some race cars, and was a racing writer and historian even before he knew he was a historian. He had a vision. He said, there's so many great people out there in motorsports. We need to do something to enshrine them and remember them. So in 1980, he called a whole lot of the industry leaders, I would say, together from, not just from West Michigan, not just from Northern Michigan, and not just from Eastern Michigan, but all over Michigan. Called them together for a meeting and discussed his vision with them and wanted to see who was on board. At that meeting, there were representatives from the Michigan Auto Racing Fan Club, Vito LaPiccolo and Bill Stone, who were very deeply involved. Vito was one of the founders of the Michigan Auto Racing Fan Club. Bob Lewis was also at that meeting, and Bob Lewis is another of the founders of the Michigan Auto Racing Fan Club. There was racing writers, Dick and Pat Beebe. There was just a huge amount of people there, probably 12 or so, that had a lot to do with racing in Michigan. In the beginning, they were going to call it MMSHOF, or basically the Michigan Auto Racing Hall of Fame. And through discussion, they realized that, we've got some great auto racing in Michigan. But we've also got other forms of racing that are just equally as great. Okay. So they decided to extend that to motorcycles, to drag racing, to road racing, boats. We've even got people that have flown airplanes in there. We've got a few people with that. So that's when they decided to call it the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame. They didn't have an induction ceremony until 1982. And back then, they would go to the racetrack where they were, or to their home, or to their shop, or wherever, and present them their plaque. Okay. Whereas today, we have a big dinner in the first Sunday in November, and you can have 400 to 500 people at it. We say we've been honoring excellence since '82, but really it started in '80. It started with a vision from Dick Lee. Of that initial meeting, there's only 2 people left that were at that initial meeting. All the others have since passed away. And they're still active. Well, at least one of them is Gary Lindahl. He's the announcer at the Flat Rock and Toledo Speedways. He's an inductee of the Hall of Fame, and he is also one of our co-MCs every year at our banquet.
So members vote on who is going to be in the Hall of Fame, correct?
Yeah, we have a process by which people are inducted. The first and foremost thing is that we need a biography on a person, on a prospective inductee. But basically, a biography is submitted to myself, sent to my address, which can be found on the website, and I'll take the biography. And then what I'll do is, if it's sent electronically, I'll go ahead and make a file for it. And then I'll send that file to all of our board members. Now, our board members, we can have up to 25 board members. At present, we have 17. So we have some openings on the board. But basically, I'll send that out to the board for review. If the board says, okay, this person has a career that's worthy of consideration, then we'll move it to the next step. Basically, we'll place it in consideration, and it will be placed on the preliminary ballot. Now, the preliminary ballot is a ballot that goes out only to the board of directors. At the April meeting, we'll tally the preliminary ballots, and we'll take the top 10 vote getters in each of the 5 categories, and that will make your 50 names for the final ballot. And that ballot goes out to all board members, all past board members, and all past inductees. And those are the people that choose. The 5 categories are oval track modern era for drivers that started at least 25 years ago, oval track historic era for drivers that started at least 50 years ago. We have other motorsports, which covers your motorcycles, your boats, your planes, your trains. We've even got a tractor puller going in this year. So we cover it all. We have a drag racing category, which encompasses all drag racing. It could be their car owners, could be a drag racing team, could be just a driver, other than driver. And the other than driver category, we split off into promoters, track owners, engine builders, car owners, those types of people that have some skin in the game, that are really taking some money out of their wallet to go do this. And then the other side of that is the scorers, officials, announcers, PR people, writers, people that more or less get paid by the sport to do what they're doing. Yep. Out of that, we will take 1 from each side of the other motorsport or other than driver category, 2 from drag racing, 2 from other motorsports, 2 from oval track modern era, and 2 from oval track historic era. And that'll make up your 10 inductees. We take the top 2 vote getters in each. We like to have 10 inductees. We've had as many as 12 and 13.
So what's your personal experience and background in motorsports?
Personal experience and background is, number 1, I'm a race fan. Bottom line. I'll sit down every weekend watch NASCAR. I'm a stock car guy. I'm not really an IndyCar type of fan, but I do like open wheels. Okay. I'm a NASCAR fan, but I'm really through and through a short track racing fan. There's a multitude of racetracks around the state, quarter-mile bull rings up to half-mile speedways, some paved, some not paved. That's what I do. I go to watch the Outlaw Late Miles, the figure 8s, the sprint cars, and all that. But I basically started out, like I said earlier, watching racing on TV with my dad when I was 6, 7 years old. And over the years, we would progress more. Racing got to be more on TV. So we did a lot of that. We'd go to the drag strip because I liked drag racing when I was a teenager. I was going to be the next Don Garlitz. Of course, so was every other kid in the neighborhood. Yeah. But somewhere along the line, I found oval track racing, local short track oval track racing at Mount Clemens Racetrack, and I got bit by that bug. So I don't think I've been to a drag strip since 1973. It was Motor City Dragway out in New Baltimore that still sits there just rotting and decaying. However, I went to Mount Clemens Racetrack and I was really bit by the bug. And part of that was the guy I worked with, Clarence Shaw. He owned a late model that raced there, and his driver was Larry LeMay. So just turned out that Larry LeMay's number was 23, so was my clock number. So it was an instant, that's the guy I wanted to see race. Since then, Larry and I have become good friends, and he's also a member of the Hall of Fame. But I just started going to Mount Clemens, and in 1981, a friend of mine and I bought a street stock. We decided to race it, so we raced it up until 85 when the track closed. I got away from racing for a while. I went big lakes boating for a number of years. And then my daughter started to see the pictures in the scrapbooks and started to ask me questions. So I said, well, let me take you to the racetrack. So I took her up to Wausau Speedway on a Wednesday night for the Patsy Simcoe Memorial. And when we walked in, I heard the names of the drivers of the cars that went around, and they were sons of the guys I raced with. I said, wow, sucked me right back in. So we started going to the races, and Eventually, a couple years later, I bought a Legends car from Michigan Legends, and I started driving those. Did that for 4 years. Got out of the seat, but I stayed with the series for 13 years. I was their PR director and chaplain. Active member of the Michigan Auto Racing Fan Club since 1979. Been on the board the longest. I've been on their board since 2001. Was their president for 4 years, 2019 to 2013. Served a couple of stints as vice president, which I'm still doing right now.
The Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame also has a benevolent fund?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. It's named after one of our longtime early board members and a member of the sprint car community in Michigan, Laura Devlin. She was an individual who, if anybody was in need, she was the first person right there. Sadly, we lost her to a house fire a number of years ago. But there was enough people on our board of directors that said, you know what, we need to do something more to give back into the community. So we had lost Laura about a year before that. And the challenge was made, said, let's raise $10,000. We'll put it in a benevolent fund. We'll name it in Laura's name. And anybody in the racing community in the state of Michigan that finds herself in a hard time due to injury, home fire, whatever the case may be, let's have a mechanism where we can give them a donation to kind of help them along. We're not ever gonna support them completely, but we're gonna give them a hand up and a help out. Basically, we've not had to hit it a whole lot. We have a number of times. We made a difference for people. People have had a house fire. We've given them some money. We've had people that were injured driving a race car. We've given them a donation. Recently, we've given to one of our own who'd had some health issues. But yeah, we do have a benevolent fund and named after Laura Devlin. What a great lady she was. She was known very well in the sprint car racing community. And she was a very, very big supporter of the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame. And we also gave her the Lifetime Dedication Award a number of years ago. And her family came to accept on her behalf.
Dave, where is the physical location of the Hall of Fame located at?
Well, at one time we had a presence in the Ransom E. Olds Museum in Lansing, Michigan. We had a small, modest display there, and I believe we had a race car in there. We had a number of trophies, helmets, paraphernalia on display, some plaques. However, as their popularity grew and they acquired more things for their exhibition, they were limited in space, so we had to give up our space. Since then, we've really been unable to find a standalone building for ourselves. So basically, where you're seeing me sit right now is the home of the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame. Most all of our artifacts are packed away in a storage locker in Grand Rapids. We do have a environmentally controlled storage locker in the Charlotte area. We have some great artifacts that someday we'll display. We have the Stator timing sheets. There was a couple named Stator. They traveled to racetracks from the 40s on, and they did the timing and scoring. Okay. And it did a service for the tracks. They didn't have to deal with it. However, these folks were so meticulous with their records. I have the original sheets in the file cabinets they stored them in, also backed up on DVDs. That is a virtual history of motorsports in Michigan, because they didn't just do one track, they did a number of tracks. So when we're trying to research a biography that's submitted to us and someone says, oh, this guy, he won all these feature races, and you look at the calendar and you say, no, that can't happen. It's just physically impossible. We're able to many times to go back through those sheets and pick up what that person did in different seasons. We have that. We have the Ken Coles photography collection. Ken Coles was a very popular photographer, member of our Hall of Fame, member of the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame. He photographed NASCAR, IndyCar, short track, sprint cars, midgets, and everything. The guy was a tremendous photographer. For a while, we had a presence at the Gilmore Museum over in the Kalamazoo Pawpaw area. Tremendous, tremendous museum. Many, many outbuildings. You mentioned Randy Sweet. When we had a small display there for a few years, we had the Sweet rocket car in there. And that's a car that Randy Sweet had put together. It had a huge wing on it thing. And
yeah, it broke a bunch of records.
And yeah, he broke all kind of track records all over the state and the country. Like I say, we had a presence in the Gilmore Museum for a while. At this point, we really have no presence anywhere. I'm working with a couple of racetracks right now, bigger tracks where we can display some plaques and a banner and bring attention to the Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. We do have a website page, www.MMSHOF.org.
Yes, I will be linking everything that we talk about. I'll be linking the information websites, and I'll put in as much information as possible in the video as well.
Mm-hmm. And we also have a Facebook page, so if you just Google the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame on Facebook, you'll find us. We would love to have a standalone museum. We have had conversations with different places over the years. We've done the numbers financially and without a major sponsor. It's just for a volunteer organization such as us, we've managed to save some money, but that money would be gone in a year.
Who are some of the people you'd feel everyone would know that are inductees into the Hall?
Okay, now while we have a ton of inductees who I may know, might not be who you know, but there's a lot of these names are probably going to be most recognizable to the average person that might go to the Grand Prix in Detroit or see the stuff on the news. People like Jack Roush and Roger Penske. Everybody knows who Henry Ford is or Louis Chevrolet. If you follow drag racing, Connie, Doug, and Scott Coletta, who also have a flying service. Shirley Muldowney. Everybody knows who Shirley Muldowney is.
Heart Like a Wheel?
Yeah, Heart Like a Wheel. Bill Muncie, one of the great hydroplane drivers who you used to see on the river in Detroit. Barney Oldfield. There's an old saying, you're driving like Barney Oldfield. Well, guess what? Barney Oldfield's in the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame. If you follow NASCAR for any length of time, Benny Parsons. Benny Parsons got his start right here at the Flat Rock Speedway. The Ram Chargers racing team, it was a factory drag racing team out of Chrysler Corporation back in the 60s. Our Golden Commandos are in as well. That was the Plymouth side. Ram Chargers were Dodge. Gar Wood, the great powerboat racer. Now everybody knows what a Chris Craft boat is. Yep. Well, Gar Wood was Chris Smith, who was Chris Craft. That was his competition. Okay. And them two guys would see who could go faster than the other. Matt Yoakum. Matt was the pit road reporter for Fox Sports for years. The Keselowski family. Anybody that watches NASCAR knows Brad Keselowski. But before him was his grandfather, his father Bob, and his uncle Ron. They were a formidable NASCAR team back in the day. Anybody watches NASCAR, they'll remember Johnny Benson Jr. Well, Johnny Benson's in, along with his father, Johnny Benson Sr. Johnny Sr. was a heck of a driver. Ray Haroon, he's the guy that won the first Indy 500. One of our inductees, Vicki Woods, who went in the Hall of Fame at 100 years old. She was the fastest lady in NASCAR. She drove on the beach and set some land speed records for stock cars at the time. Drove for Ray Fox. She drove for Carl Kiekhaefer in the famed the Chrysler 300 Mercury outboard cars. She started out at Flat Rock, and she was the fastest lady, and she was beating the men, and the men decided, says, well, if you don't go somewhere else, we're not going to race because we're not getting beat by a lady. But she was a real jewel. You've got the Markham family. John Markham, Mildred Markham, husband and wife duo, started ARCA, ran the Flat Rock Speedway, Toledo Speedway, and their grandson, Ron Drager, who is the head of ARCA, he owns the Flat Rock and Toledo Speedways. All of them are in. We just had a road race team go in a few years ago, Pratt and Miller. Every time you see Corvette racing on the road racing, in fact, they just did very well at the 24 Hours of Le Mans over the weekend. So there's there's a lot of connections back and forth. But
Yep.
like I say, some of the notable people: Louis Chevrolet, Henry Ford, Jack Roush, Roger Penske. You know, you go drive down the road, you see a Penske truck.
I don't know of anybody that
Same
wouldn't
guy.
at least know Penske, even if they're not a race fan.
Same guy. So the requirement for someone to get into the Hall of Fame or be considered is, number one, they have to have either been born in Michigan or lived in Michigan at some time during their life or their career. So we look for Michigan residents, but we've got a few people that live down south now, but they came from Michigan. They spent 15, 20 years of their life here. You don't actually have to live in Michigan, but you need to have had your career here in Michigan.
So you guys have a yearly banquet induction ceremony. When does that take place and where?
The yearly banquet induction ceremony is on a Sunday afternoon in November of each year. It's always the first Sunday, and I make sure of that because I booked the banquet center 3 and 4 years ahead of time. But it's for the past, I believe, 20 years now. It has been at the University Comfort Inn in Mount Pleasant, located right across the street from the stadium there, the football stadium. They have a hotel attached to it so people can stay there. They have a banquet room that holds up to 500 people. So basically on that first Sunday in November, we'll start out at 11 o'clock with a cocktail hour and registration. A little after 12, we'll have everybody sit down. By 12:30, we're doing inductions. 1:30, we break for a very nice buffet meal. Once that's done, we go back into inductions. We have you on the road by 5 o'clock. But this is what we do every year. We typically have someone will bring some sort of a race vehicle somewhere. We've had snowmobiles inside, motorcycles inside. One time we had a car in there. It was a skinny, fuel altered, so we snuck it through the kitchen. Don't tell anybody, and food was still good.
At least a few hundred people might see this. So.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll have a race car out front. Johnny Neese, a local guy, his father Ray Neese is in the Hall of Fame, and he did a mock-up or a reproduction of his dad's '57 Ford with the old Ford angle back transporter, and he brought that one year, painted up like his dad's race car. The year that Larry LeMay went into the Hall of Fame, because Larry LeMay was one of Ray Neese's proteges and good friends. It costs us $45 donation. It's a cash bar, buffet dinner. You get a program, and you get to see this. We have a silent auction, and we have a 50-50, and we have souvenir paraphernalia for sale. But anybody can come, and I'll tell you what, the room's magic, because every time you turn around, you see another legend in motorsports from Michigan. And not just an oval track racer, but you'll see snowmobile racers, you'll see motorcycle racers, boat racers. You just cannot believe how much talent is in one room. And the stories that you hear. I mean, everybody got faster as they got older.
Yeah, and the fish was always this big.
Yeah, it always was.
Is there a resource for anyone who's interested and lives in the state or is coming to Michigan and wants to go to a race? Is there a good way for them to figure out where some of these tracks are and what's available to them?
Oh, if you're going to come to Michigan and you want to go to a racetrack, or any other state for that matter, there's a couple of different things. You can go on to the Michigan Speedway Promoters Association website or Facebook page, the MSPA. But that's an association of all the different racetrack owners and promoters in the state of Michigan. And we meet together in the spring and in the fall to discuss our seasons, what's going on, how'd this work, how'd that work, what didn't work. But we have a listing, a link to each and every single track that's a member all over the state. The other thing that's invaluable is the National Speedway Directory. You can get that online, and then you can purchase the book. I personally got about a dozen or so of them from different years. The book was started out by Alan Brown, and Alan Brown was one of our founders of the Hall of Fame, and he since passed away here a couple months ago. But he and his wife Nancy would travel everywhere in the states and the country And this book has every racetrack in the state, each of the 50 states and Canada. And it lists not only oval tracks, it lists road race courses, and it lists drag strips. Okay. So National Speedway Directory, put out by Tim Frost now. He purchased the book from Alan and Nancy, but it's a tremendous resource.
That sounds like it, because especially with everything, the drag and drive events and everybody going around the country now, it's knowing where you're going and some of the history and where things were.
And it's got directions to each and every racetrack, physical location, so you can plug that into your GPS and get there. Okay. Got the phone number, website information. Get on there, Google it, you can find it. So that would be my recommendation, would be the National Speedway Directory.
You're getting ready to release your inductee list for 2023, is that correct?
We are. The class of 223 has been selected. We did that last Wednesday. Most everybody knows at this point, and by the time this comes out, they will know. It's a very, very eclectic list of people. They cover a lot of bases. Some I know, some I didn't know. Some I've seen race, some I haven't. Our list of inductees for the class of 2023 are, other than driver category, are William Barnhart, more widely known as Wild Bill. Wild Bill was the longtime president of the Michigan Auto Racing Fan Club. He started up WBVS Photos, so he was the track photographer for the Flat Rock and Toledo Motor Speedways. He's been an ARCA official for many years, and he's also been instrumental in keeping the Mount Clemens racetrack alive through reunions and different things. And he does his own little thing called the Mount Clemens Racetrack Hall of Fame. In the oval track historical era, Wayne Bennett, late model racer. A lot of people have heard the story about Benny Parsons, how he was picked up by a couple of guys at his dad's gas station, went to the racetrack, and the rest is history. Wayne Bennett's the guy that took him to the racetrack. Neil Crane, affectionately known as Red Crane, powerboat racer. Okay. Guy's driven for well over 40 teams. He's got 7 world championships in APBA offshore powerboat racing. Anybody that grew up around St. Clair Shores and Lake St. Clair was going to know who Red Crane is. Another inductee from the other than driver category is Will Cronkright. I'm saying that right, Cronkright. Started taking things apart when he was a kid. Got the wanderlust, got himself an old motorcycle and rode it all over the country. Will's a very, very engineering-minded fellow. He is most notably a NASCAR crew chief, NASCAR fabricator, NASCAR crew member, and he owned the number 98 Ford Torino that Dale Earnhardt Sr. drove before Dale Earnhardt Sr. got his big break. Okay. So he's a really, really neat individual. He's got a book out called I Was a NASCAR Redneck. He's traveled the country doing book signings and different things. A very, very wonderful individual to speak with. Lee Elkins, the late Lee Elkins, born in 1912, passed away in 1979. His son Brian Lee Elkins drove for him too in the midgets. But Lee was a car owner. He owned a business, McNamara Trucking. All of his cars carried McNamara Trucking and the number 73. Had some very notable drivers drive for him, and they had a lot of success. I mentioned earlier we had a tractor puller going in. Richard Kalasek won a number of national championships. Started out, in the stock category and been pulling tractors for a long, long time.
They've always had a special place in my heart for tractor pulling. Okay. So
yeah, I tell you what, when you think about tractor pulling, so it's not as simple as you just step on a tractor and step on the gas and pull a sled.
The technology and the power involved in those things, and just what else are you going to find that has 6 engines on it, or an old jet motor?
And they work together. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen this guy drive a wing sprint car, a non-wing sprint car. This guy's driven ARCA cars. He's driven midgets, quarter midgets. Jimmy McCune. He's the multi-time must-see racing series champion. In the oval track historical area, we have Dick Mitchell. Dick raced against Wayne Bennett a number of times, and Dick was a standout back in the old days, and he's going in We lost Dick a number of years ago. Dick moved down to Alabama for a while, and then he moved to Florida, picked up Legends cars, and then finally hung up his helmet. Dan and Frank Parker is a father and son team that are going in a drag racing category. Dan started racing, he had a Ford-powered Fiat, started drag racing. And then he moved up and he bought himself a chassis from the guy that had Detroit Dragway. And he started in a B-altered division. So he drove for a while. Then his son Frank Parker took over as crew chief when he was 15 years old. And Frank took over as car owner. And they've run funny cars, top alcohol funny cars, a dragster. And so they've set a lot of divisional championship wins and records of that nature. And the last inductee for this year is the late Charlie Ryan Jr., affectionately known as Chargin' Charlie. He was very, very well known at the Spartan Speedway up in Lansing. Drove a lot at the Owasso Speedway, Springport, Galesburg, Flat Rock. We're not really sure how far he could have gone because he passed away right at the height of his career, right when he was doing a lot of winning. And so we're not really sure how far he could have went, but he really made a mark on racing. He was an absolute gentleman to everyone he met. Hard racer, clean racer, good racer. Additionally, we have 2022 inductees going to be there this year. He wasn't able to make it last year. This guy is the owner of FLF Race Cars, one of the leading manufacturer of super late model outlaw race car chassis. Tim Curry out of West Michigan. That's our class for this year. We do have some special awards that we give away. We have a Lifetime Dedication Award, and that's for a person that's dedicated their life to motorsports, without even thinking about it. That's what they did. And we recognize these people. And the recipient this year is Linda Bloom. Linda's husband, Jeff, is a inductee of the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame. He's also an inductee of the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame and a three-time winner of the Little 500 in Anderson, Indiana. But Linda comes from a racing family. Her folks are Dick and Pat Beebe, who put out the Mark Times Racing News for years. Sadly, we've lost both Dick and Pat, but Linda's been around racing her entire life. And she's a good person. Her and Jeff is in his 70s. He's still racing sprint cars. And a lot of times it's just her and Jeff. And you'll see her out there measuring tires, changing tires, and changing the pills in the injectors, doing whatever she can do. We also have the Dick Beebe Memorial Award, named after Linda's father. This award goes to people that are behind the scenes that contribute to racing and really make a difference. This year it goes to Nancy Brown. Her husband was Alan Brown, who was one of our founders of the Hall of Fame. She traveled with Alan as they put out the National Speedway Directory, plus some other books on racing, History of America Speedways, different things like that is what another book that they put out. I'll bet she's more widely known in racing than a lot of other people are. And there's a Mick Schuler Media Award. One of the leading announcers in the state of Michigan, Mick Schuler, was just tremendous. Had a huge influence on many of our young announcers coming up through the ranks this year. This award is presented to media type individuals, writers, publishers, announcers, different things. This year it's going to go to John Singler. John is a news director at MRN Radio Network. He also puts out a weekly NASCAR newsletter. That is our award winners and our inductees for the class of 2023. Anything I can do at any time to bring recognition to the Hall of Fame, I'm all for it. Any way to promote it, I'm all for it.
And I do greatly appreciate it. I think on that note, we will end the interview, and I thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely please check out the website. They do have merchandise available as well. If there's anything you'd like to know, please contact them. And thank you very much for watching.